All right, well, let's turn our Bibles to Genesis 30. Genesis chapter 30. The saga continues. The saga continues. We left off last time. Jacob had two wives. Who were his two wives he had last time? Who can tell them? Just say them out. Rachel and Leah. That's right. And which one was his favorite? Rachel. But which one had given him all his children so far? Leah, that's right. And so who can name the four children that Leah gave? Just name one of them at a time, maybe. Reuben, Simeon, good. Judah? Levi, that's right. Reuben is the oldest, and Simeon, then Levi, and then Judah. And so, desperate to give Jacob children, but refusing to cry out to God or to wait on God, Rachel gives Jacob her handmaid, Bilhah, so that she can have children for Jacob through her. And there's a real popular, I don't know if it's a TV show or what, called The Handmaid's Tale. And it comes from this right here, which is you had the wife, which was Rachel, and then you had the one who bore the children, which is Bilhah. And so not an ideal situation, and it's not the way God designed it. And so just because the Bible says that the patriarchs did something doesn't mean it necessarily was right. And we're going to see here that Rachel and Jacob are about to do something that is sinful. And that is because God wants us to have one wife for life. That is his ideal, and they're about to mess that up. And so, let's see, chapter 30 of Genesis, and we'll go back to verse number 3. And Rachel said, Behold, my maid Bilhah, go in unto her, and she shall bear upon my knees, that I may also have children by her. And at this moment, Jacob should have been the man, and he should have stood up and said, that's the same thing that my mama Sarah said to Papa Abraham, and it didn't work out for them, and it's not going to work out for us either. But remember, at this point, I don't believe we can say that Jacob was saved. And so we see here Jacob giving into this. And so verse number 4, and she gave him Bilhah, her handmaid, to wife, and Jacob went in unto her. Now remember, we mentioned this last time, that no matter the circumstances, children are a blessing from God. Children are a gift from God, no matter the circumstances. And it is God who puts life in a mother's womb. And so we see in verse number 5, and Bilhah conceived and bare Jacob a son. And Rachel said, God hath judged me, and hath also heard my voice, and hath given me a son. Therefore called she his name Dan. And so we see here Dan, and what that means is judge. God has judged my situation, and God has given me this son, and so they call him judge, which is the word Dan. It says, verse number 7, and Bilhah, Rachel's maid, conceived again, and bare Jacob a second son. And Rachel said, with great wrestlings have I wrestled with my sister, and I have prevailed. And she called his name Naphtali. And so the word Naphtali means to wrestle. I'm in this competition with my sister Leah, and my handmaid has given Jacob two sons, and so now I'm starting to win the wrestling match, is what she's saying here, with the name Naphtali. And so we see here at this point, Jacob has how many sons? 6. That's right. And so there are 12 tribes of of Israel, and so we have 6 more sons to go. Well, where did the other 6 come from? We're going to find out. It says, verse 9, when Leah saw that she had left bearing, she took Zilpah her maid and gave her Jacob to wife. And so, not willing to be outdone, Leah also followed the example of her grandmother-in-law Sarah and offered her handmaid to Jacob for the purpose of having children. So this is what we call a messed up family here, okay? All right, so verse number 10, and Zilpah, Leah's maid, bare Jacob a son. And Leah said, a troop cometh, and she called his name Gad. And so God blessed Zilpah with a child, and the word Gad means troops, or it could mean good fortune. In other words, something good is getting ready to happen. And so here it is. We have Leah had the first 4 sons. Bilhah had the next 2. And here we have Zilpah with the first one, and that is Gad. Well, it doesn't stop there. Verse 12. And Zilpah, Leah's maid, bare Jacob a second son. And Leah said, happy am I, for the daughters will call me blessed. And she called his name Asher. And so what do you think Asher means? Huh? Blessed, right. Blessed or happy. That's right. So Asher means happy. And so here she is. She's caught up with her sister Rachel, not only giving Jacob 4 sons, but now through her maid giving Jacob 2 more sons. So 4 plus 2 plus 2 equals what? 8. That is correct. Okay. All right. We see something very interesting in verse number 14. And Reuben, and he is the firstborn son of Leah, went in the days of wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field and brought them unto his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, give me, I pray thee, of thy son's mandrakes. And she said unto her, is it a small matter that thou hast taken my husband? And wouldest thou take away my son's mandrakes also? And Rachel said, therefore he shall lie with thee tonight for thy son's mandrakes. And Jacob came out of the field in the evening, and Leah went out to meet him and said, thou must come in unto me, for surely I have hired thee with my son's mandrakes. And he lay with her that night. And God hearkened unto Leah, and she conceived and bare Jacob his 5th son. So anyway, Leah, her son Reuben, the firstborn, found these mandrakes. Now, what are mandrakes? Well, evidently at that time, people held that mandrakes, also known as the love fruit, was a yellow fruit the size of a small apple and was associated with fertility or being able to have children. The fact that Rachel trusted in this pagan superstition tells us something about Rachel. Rachel's thinking, okay, here's some mandrakes. Here's this love fruit. If I can have that fruit, then perhaps I can conceive and have a child. But what she didn't realize is that God blessed Leah because I think he wanted Rachel to learn that it isn't mandrakes, it isn't superstition, it isn't pagan traditions that give you a child, but where do children come from? God. That is right. Children come, they're a blessing of God. And so, we have here in verse number 18, and Leah said, God has given me my hire because I have given my maiden to my husband, and she called his name Issachar. Okay, let's see, verse number 17. And God hearkened unto Leah, and she conceived and bare Jacob the 5th son. And Leah said, God hath given me my hire because I have given my maiden to my husband, and she called his name Issachar. And the word Issachar means wages. And so Issachar was purchased in a human sense with Reuben's mandrakes. Okay, so wages. All right. Verses 19 through 21, God keeps pouring out the blessing on Leah. And Leah conceived again and bare Jacob the 6th son. And Leah said, God hath endued me with a good dowry. Now will my husband dwell with me, because I have borne him 6 sons. And she called his name Zebulun. And so Zebulun means honor or dwelling. I'm going to be an honored wife now. My husband's going to want to be with me because I have given him 6 sons. That was an important thing in that culture. And then, kind of as an aside, it says here, and afterwards, verse 21, she bare a daughter and called her name Dinah. And it's interesting, the word Dinah, according to Scofield, means judgment. Judgment. And so she has this daughter and calls her Judgment. And later on, what we're going to see is that Dinah is going to grow up, and there's going to be an account of what happened with her, and it's not a good account. But we'll get to that a little later. That's why she's mentioned. I don't know if any of these 4 wives of Jacob, if any of them had any other daughters. The sons are the ones who are listed primarily in the Bible, but this one's listed because she's going to come up a little later in the biblical narrative. Well, verse number 22. Rachel finally learns her lesson, I believe. It says, and God remembered Rachel, and God hearkened to her and opened her womb. God hearkened to her. God either heard her prayers or heard her crying in the night because she had no sons for Jacob. In either case, it says God opened her womb. Can I stress this strongly enough? It is God who puts life in the womb. And I don't care how that life comes into being. It could be the right way, which is through marriage, or it could be the wrong way, which is outside of marriage. But that life cannot help how it was conceived, how he or she was conceived. And that life that is in the womb is a gift from God. Someone says, well, what about if one of your daughters was raped, terribly raped and abused, and had a child in conception out of that? I would say, well, that's an awful thing. But you know what? That life in the womb may be the blessing that causes this terrible event to have some meaning in my daughter's life. And people say, well, you're cruel, you're awful. I say, no, because every life in the womb is a gift from God, no matter what the human circumstances might be. And so, Adam Clark says this about Rachel. It appears that she sought God by prayer, and that he heard her, so that her prayer and faith obtained what her impatience and unbelief had prevented. And so I like the fact that he's taken a positive view of Rachel. So verse number 23. And she conceived and bare a son and said, God has taken away my reproach. And she called his name Joseph and said, the Lord shall add to me another son. Now this is interesting here. I'd never really thought of this. But the word Joseph means add to. Add to. And so in naming Joseph this, she was asking God to give her another son. Give me more sons, is what she's saying to God. God does answer her prayer later in the book of Genesis, but with fatal consequences. With fatal consequences. And we will get into that. I don't know. She should have been thankful for the son she had received. Maybe she was like, okay, I need to catch up with Leah. I don't know what the circumstances were. But she does receive another son eventually, but with fatal consequences. And so those are the 11 sons, the 11 tribes of Judah. Is that the complete number, 11? Is that the complete number? No, there are 12 tribes. And we're going to get to that 12th tribe a little later in our narrative. Any comments or any questions about the 11 sons and one daughter of Judah? Jacob. I'm sorry. All these names are just, I think it's when you turn 50, they just start like, but please correct me. I don't want to be on tape saying the wrong name. And someone says, tape? What do you mean tape? Okay, never mind. Okay, any comments or questions about the 11 sons of Jacob or his wives? All right, well, let's keep moving on then if there's no question. Jacob negotiates a new contract with Laban. That's the next section here. Remember, Jacob has been working for 14 years, and his 14 years are up. And he's been working for 14 years for what? 2 women, right? Okay, he got 4. 2 for 1, right? He got these handmaids as well as getting Leah and Rachel. But anyway, the 14 years are up. In verse number 25, and it came to pass when Rachel had borne Joseph, that Jacob said unto Laban, send me away, that I may go unto mine own place and to my country. Give me my wives and my children, for whom I have served thee, and let me go. For thou knowest my service which I have done unto thee. I've kept my word, Laban. I've worked my 14 years for you. I'm ready now to take my wife and 12 children back to my home country of Canaan. All right, so what is Laban's response going to be? Remember, the blessing of God is on Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so if the blessing of God is on Jacob, guess who else has been blessed by Jacob's presence? Laban. That's right. And so does Laban want to give up his reason for blessing? No. Verse 27 and 28. And Laban said unto Jacob, I pray thee, I beg you, if I have found favor in thine eyes, tarry, for I have learned by experience that the Lord has blessed me for thy sake. And he said, appoint me thy wages, and I will give it. Experience has taught Laban that Jehovah had blessed him for Jacob's sake. There's some who believe that the word experience should be divination. So I will just throw that out there, but I don't know that there's any reason to believe that. I mean, Laban had seen, and Jacob's going to point out that the flocks have increased greatly, and Laban's wealth has increased greatly over the last 14 years. So experience could have taught him this as well. But Laban says to Jacob, name the price, and I will pay it for you to stay here and continue working for me. Now we learn later that when someone like Uncle Laban says name your price, that Uncle Laban sometimes reneges on his end of the bargain. Okay, but he does say that. Whatever you want, I've got to have you, boy. You tell me what you want, and I'll give it to you. Uncle Laban will give it to you. Verse number 30. Verse 29. And Jacob said unto him, thou knowest how I have served thee, and how thy cattle was with me. And cattle just means livestock, which is sheep and goats. For it was little which thou hast before I came, and it is now increased unto a multitude. And the Lord has blessed thee since my coming. And now, when shall I provide for mine own house also? Jacob says, I agree with you, Laban. God has blessed you since I've been here. And God does that. He does that when his people work for someone. But he says to Laban, when can I start building up wealth for my family too? I have my own family, Laban, and it's time for me to start building up wealth for my own family. And so he makes the proposition to Laban. Verse 31, and he said, what shall I give thee? That's what Laban said. And Jacob said, thou shalt not give me anything. Well, if thou wilt do this thing for me, I will again feed and keep thy flock. I will pass through all thy flock today, removing from thence all the speckled and spotted cattle. And remember, cattle simply means livestock. And all the brown cattle among the sheep. and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and of such shall be my hire. So shall my righteousness answer for me in time to come, when it shall come for my hire before thy face. Everyone that is not speckled and spotted among the goats, and brown among the sheep, that shall be counted stolen with me. And so what Jacob is saying is, you give me the ugly sheep and the ugly goats, and I'll give you the pretty ones. And there won't be any question. Now my daughter Eden would say, oh, but the spotted ones are real pretty. The streaked ones are real pretty. Well, that's okay. Okay, whatever. But the point is, they're differentiating. Laban can't say, you've stolen my sheep, if Jacob's sheep look totally different than Laban's. That's the whole point here. And I think Jacob is saying here, I'm going to show you that God is blessing me. And he's saying here, my righteousness is going to be proven through this, because God is going to bless me with these odd-colored goats and sheep. And so, we see here, so what is speckled? What is a speckled? You see speckled and we see spotted, which are the words for speckled and spotted. Speckled means having numerous, very small, often irregular dots or flecks upon it. And the illustration that was given is like a speckled trout. It just has random dots all over it. Kind of like my son Zach's face with freckles, just has random dots all over it, That is speckled. Spotted, these are larger, more distinct, often rounded spots. And someone said kind of like a Dalmatian. Maybe like a leopard, right? A leopard has spots, something like that. And so speckled is like freckles. Spotted is more like a Dalmatian or like a leopard. And so anything that has little dots or that has big dots is going to be Jacob's. And also he's asking for every brown sheep. And some have suggested maybe this means just dark or black sheep. The black sheep. And so, everybody will know this is Jacob's. This is what God is giving Jacob. And this is what God is giving Laban. So verse 34. And Laban said, behold, I would it might be according to thy word. Laban agrees to Jacob's conditions. But, and there's always a but with Laban, verse number 35, what does he do? And he removed that day the he-goats that were ring-straked and spotted, and all the she-goats that were speckled and spotted, and every one that had some white in it, and all the brown among the sheep, and gave them into the hands of his sons. So what did Laban do? He gave all the male speckled and spotted sheep and goats and his brown sheep to who? To his sons. And so he thinks he has fixed Jacob. Before Jacob can get to the flock, or whatever you call it, he's taken all the male goats and all the male sheep that fit these categories. And so obviously, when the females produce, they're not going to produce the kind of sheep or goats that would give Jacob his hire or his wages. So Laban has really put in the fix. And what does Laban do? Verse 36, and he set 3 days' journey betwixt himself and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flocks. Why did he do that? Well, I think at this point, they definitely did not trust one another. And so Laban did not want his sons' male sheep and goats breeding with Jacob's sheep and goats, females, and producing more livestock for Jacob. And so here they are, 3 days apart, and Laban is put in the fix, right? He's taken all the male goats and sheep that would produce these odd-colored goats and sheep, and poor little Jacob, right? No. Jacob is blessed of God. Now, Jacob does something crazy here, verses 37 through 39. Jacob took him rods of green poplar and of the hazel and chestnut tree, and peeled white stakes in them, and made the white appear, which was in the rods. So he took these various kinds of sticks, and he scraped them, so you can see the inside of the stick, is what he did there. And he set the rods which he had peeled, which means to cut into, before the flocks in the gutters, in the watering troughs, when the flocks came to drink, that they should conceive when they came to drink. And so he took his funny-looking sticks with a little cut in them, and he put them in the watering troughs. And so the sheep and the goats would come to these watering troughs, and they would drink from the water in which these sticks were located. And they would look at these sticks as they drank their water. Verse 39, and the flocks conceived before the rods, and brought forth cattle, ring-straked, speckled, and spotted. Okay. Jacob is most likely using a superstitious method. Put fresh sticks of poplar, almond, and plane trees in the troughs where the flocks are watered. Peel those sticks, and the livestock will produce striped, speckled, and spotted offspring. It seems to work in verse number 39, right? Because that's the kind of sheep and goats he got. But later we're going to find out it wasn't Jacob's crazy method that caused these sheep and goats to be this way. Who was it? It was God. In the same way that, God puts life inside of a human womb, God puts life inside of an animal womb. Now, animals don't have the same value as a human, but we see God putting these funny-looking sheep and goats inside the bellies of these mama goats and sheep. Oh, me. Verse 40. And Jacob did separate the lambs, and set the faces of the flocks toward the ring-straked, and all the brown in the flock of Laban. And he put his own flocks by themselves, and put them not unto Laban's cattle. And it came to pass, whensoever the stronger cattle did conceive, that Jacob laid the rods, there's these rods again, before the eyes of the cattle in the gutters, this is the watering troughs, that they might conceive among the rods. But when the cattle were feeble, he put them not in, so the feebler were Laban's, and the stronger Jacob's. Remember, not only is Laban a trickster, but Jacob is a trickster too. And so Jacob begins a selective breeding policy, which results in more speckled, spotted, and brown livestock being produced for Jacob, and stronger livestock being produced for Jacob as well. And it ends this chapter in verse 43, and the man increased exceedingly, and had much cattle, and manservants, and maidservants, and menservants, and camels, and asses. So here we have Jacob, richly blessed of God. And how do you think that Laban and his sons feel about all this? How do you think they feel? Man, we took all the male sheep and the male goats that looked like these types that Jacob was going to keep. What happened? Oh, he's stealing. He's stealing our goats. He's a crook. Jacob's a crook. Yeah. So how do you think that Laban and his sons feel about Jacob right now? I wish I could get my hands around his neck. I'd choke him. And that's exactly what happened, and we'll talk about that next time.